Deciding to go indie was an easy decision, but if I knew how hard it was, I never would have done it. It is extremely difficult. That being said, now that I'm an indie developer, I don't think I'll ever do anything else. I just don't think I can go back again. I think the first time I realized I wanted to be indie was when I was in San Francisco. There's something about taking your future into your own hands that is so empowering. My very first job in games I was in college and I went to a conference called GDC and I met a new studio called Slipgate Ironworks. And they were on the other side of the country and I hadn't actually graduated college yet, but I left New York immediately and I moved across the country to go work there. And that was really fun and I learned a ton while I was there. I think I was at Slipgate Ironworks for about 6 months before the studio closed down and we all lost our jobs, and that was terrifying. I had signed a lease for a year and I was stuck in this place so far from home with like no friends and family to speak of other than people I had just met while I was out there. And then it was gone in a moment. I moved from California back to this coast. I moved to Boston and I've been here ever since. I worked at a studio called Irrational Games on BioShock Infinite. I really loved working on that title. The character that I'd worked on was painted on the side of a skyscraper. We had advertisements for it during the Super Bowl. It was huge. But shortly after we shipped the final DLC, unfortunately, the studio closed and we all found ourselves out of the job again. That's kind of how the industry is sometimes. It's always been incredibly turbulent. It turns out there is a silver lining to this sort of thing. I was in Boston. I was surrounded by incredibly talented people that I loved working with. And I managed to get together with 5 of them and we founded our own studio, The Molasses Flood. And that's how I went indie. That was my first taste of going indie. So the first title I worked on after I went indie was The Flame in the Flood. I was really proud of this game. I loved it. But initially it didn't do so well out of the gate. We didn't have a lot of sales. We were constantly struggling to find work to keep our studio together. There's nothing I can say that can describe what that feels like. It's really hard. Not only are you letting yourself down, but you're letting down other people. Over time, it did a lot better, and I'm really proud to say that the Molasses Flood is still making games today. And that gave me the strength and the background I needed to go and take off completely on my own. After that project, I went and I founded my own studio, Chump Squad, which is where I'm making games today. I was already part of an indie studio. I didn't really initially plan to go even more indie. But over time, I had started this side project at home. And it was a tiny project that couldn't sustain a larger studio. And so I talked with the team and we came to an agreement and I just had to take off and go work on this smaller thing. And that game became Kine. It became huge. Over the course of 2 years, it became a game that is now on every platform. It's on every console. It was a launch title on Google Stadia last year, and I'm extremely proud of how that panned out. And that's just not something I could have done without the Unreal Engine. I'm a studio of 1 person full-time with a couple of contractors. I don't know C++. There was a time when I couldn't make a game like this. This engine has reached a point where somebody like me, who's an artist, who comes from an artist background and who does not know how to program, can make an entire video game. This is huge. I'm working on a new title now, Lab Rat, which was something that was very much inspired by the coronavirus. I don't want to make a game that makes people sad. Instead, I thought it'd be more fun to talk about tech, to talk about this shared experience that we have right now. And I think the best work I've ever done is the work that tends to marry those two things, where I have an interesting piece of technology, a tech demo that I really want to use, and I've got a feeling that I want to capture and that I want to showcase to the world. And I think if you can find a way to combine those two things, that's been my strategy to figure out what to work on at any given time. I find it is so important to work on something that I believe in and that I'm passionate in. And after having gone through the experience of being at these companies and working on these titles and still being laid off, I find that especially when you're working on a very small team or when you're responsible for the work, it is extremely important that you love what you're doing. In video games, the vast majority of projects fail. And if you're going to fail, then by God, you better be working on something that you believe in. I think that's the whole reason why people go indie.